What's up YouTube? Fantard here to do a UFC MMA predictions video. And it's been a while since I've done one of these videos and it feels good to do one again. So I was thinking if I were to do a prediction video, I was thinking what fight is coming up that probably interests me the most. And right now there's a lot of fights that the UFC is trying to get to happen. And like Demetrius Johnson versus TJ Dillashaw, or possibly Frankie Edgar or Cub Swanson versus Max Holloway, but those are all possible fights. They haven't actually been scheduled. And so I was looking at the schedule of the UFC and I'm thinking, what fight here interests me that's coming up that is really important for their division? And the one that I came to mind was, well, maybe because I'm a little biased, was Kelvin Gastelum versus Chris Weidman. And I'm a huge Kelvin Gastelum fan. I like Chris Weidman, but I've been following Kelvin Gastelum ever since like The Ultimate Fighter, when he beat Uriah Hall, through the season when he choked out all the competition, and when he was pretty much the dark horse. So yeah, I'm really like attached to Kelvin. He's like one of my favorite fighters. So I'm gonna try and be as unbiased as possible as I make this prediction video. Now, this fight taking place UFC on Fox in Long Island, Chris Weidman's hometown. He has got his back up against the wall. It's in his hometown. He's on a 3-fight win streak. No fighter ever wants to be on a 4-fight win streak, especially a former champion who like a couple years ago was like on top of the world. He lost to Luke Rockhold, he lost to Yoel Romero, he lost to Mousasi, but they were all competitive fights in their own way. It's not like he got blown out of the water. Luke Rockhold, I believe he won the first round, and the second round I gave to Rockhold. And the third round, I thought Chris was winning until he threw that spinning heel kick. And then he lost to Yoel Romero, which I had it 1-1 even going into the third. And right as soon as he enters the third, Yoel Romero blasts him with a flying knee. And of course, Mousasi, that fight was a toss-up to me. And it would have been really awesome to see how that go in the third. I had given Weidman like maybe the edge in the first round because he kept using his ground game. But Mousasi was kind of getting the edge on him in the stand-up. And the second round was like going back and forth because they had mad scrambles. And Mousasi was probably going to win that second round due to those legal knees. But he did get the TKO, rightfully so. But unfortunately for Chris Weidman, he kind of didn't know the rules, but he was kind of like overplaying it. He tried to sell it that he was getting hurt, tried to play off the illegal card. But as soon as he found out that those knees were legal, he like acted like he was all fine and good and dandy. So you can't play the game dirty like that and expect to come out on a win. So either way, 3 losses, all competitive losses. Now Kelvin Gastelum, he's on suspension right now for being popped for marijuana. He knocked out Vitor Belfort just like everyone else has, but he just made it look that much more impressive. Like Belfort didn't even get off his initial burst that he always gets, and Kelvin just shut him down completely. And the thing is, Belfort looked fast in that fight, but Kelvin had great footwork and head movement and great boxing for him not to get caught by Belfort, and he just like pretty much outboxed him. He had great placement with his hands, great timing. He knew how to time the distance and how much room he should give Belfort before he should knock him out. Before that, he destroyed Tim Kennedy, defended the takedowns pretty well, was able to get back up onto his feet. And Tim Kennedy is just not a good striker. He just has such sloppy hands. And Kelvin's boxing just like really improved. It seems to has improved from 170 to 185 because he had a fight with Johnny Hendricks. And his boxing looked pretty clean, just not as crisp. And it seems to me like he has more power now that he doesn't have to cut all that weight. No doubt though, Kelvin is still a small 185 pounder. If he were to get like his diet together and he knew how to eat healthy throughout as a lifestyle, he could probably make 170. But it seems to me he's really undisciplined when it comes to his Hispanic Mexican food, you know, what he grew up in. And he still has a little bit of soft tissue there around the belly, some fat. So he could make 170 if he were to make the right adjustments. But right now, he's depending on 185, and he is really dependent on his speed, athleticism, his boxing, and his cardio. That's what really has been getting him so far throughout some of the fighters at 185. He's undefeated at 185 pounds against Nate Marquardt, Kennedy, and Uriah Hall, and Vitor Belfort. Now, Chris Weidman is going to be another step up in competition. Now, as far as this fight goes, if you look at the grappling, you'd have to give that to Chris Weidman. He's a much more decorated wrestler. His ground game is really great. He was able to roll around with... he took down Yoel Romero a couple times. And even though Yoel Romero is a better wrestler, just by you taking him down, that just shows how much of a strong grappler you are. He has rolled with... And he has beaten up Anderson Silva inside his guard for like a round and a half. He's taken down Lyoto Machida at will, and Lyoto Machida was known to have like really good takedown defense in the past. But then Lyoto Machida was kind of at the end of his prime. He has a really strong guillotine, that standing guillotine, and he just has a really strong ground game. He was able to hold down Luke Rockhold for like a round and a half and get onto his back. Where Kelvin Gastelum, even though his grappling is really solid, he's really more of a scrambler. And what I mean by scrambler is that like whenever they're in the process of, someone will try and take him down, and then Kelvin is really great at reversals and how he's able to like use their weight against them. Like he did that against Kennedy. He's done that a couple times. I think he did it one time against Neil Magny. He's really good at reversing people, and he's like he has such great cardio that he can get away with that stuff. He does have good takedowns himself. We saw him slam Neil Magny. He was able to take down Rick Story, but it's not at the level of Chris Weidman's. He has a good enough takedown defense where he can make Chris Weidman struggle, but in order for him to make him struggle, he'd have to get him past the first 2 rounds. See, that's where I think Chris Weidman should win this fight if he's able to do it within the first couple of rounds. He'd have to take him down, pound him out, or submit him, because if Chris Weidman otherwise we're going to see a repeat of what happened in his previous fights. Chris Weidman goes for a takedown, the guy keeps getting back up. He's able to withstand the storm of the Chris Weidman ground game. And if Kelvin can get it past the first 2 rounds, that's where his chances increase exponentially. So ground game, Chris Weidman. Cardio, you'd have to give it to Kelvin, because when Kelvin is on weight, when he makes weight, when he doesn't struggle and he doesn't miss it, he does not look tired at all. But every time he has missed weight, I believe 3 times for 170, all of those, there were times where he looked a little sluggish and really slow and just not as explosive. But for 185 pounds, where he doesn't have to worry about the weight cut, he has looked amazing. He does not gas out. Kennedy tried to wear him down. He looked completely calm and collected. And that's going to be a huge factor in this fight, because Kelvin Gastelum, his ground game is strong enough to where he can hold off Chris Weidman. And if he can hold him off enough where it gets into the later rounds, then that's where I think he can possibly take Chris Weidman out. Now, in the striking department, you'd have to give that one to Kelvin. Like, Chris Weidman has had some knockouts. He knocked out Anderson Silva when Anderson had his hands down. He knocked out Mark Munoz, but Mark Munoz isn't the best striker. See, with Chris's striking, he has some good kicks, but they're more so like kicks where he has to set up the takedown. They're good kicks where he is able to mix it up. He would kick Lyoto Machida a couple times. He kicked Rockhold a couple times. So not powerhouse kicks, but there are solid kicks where he can get the fighter thinking more than just about his wrestling. His boxing is very mediocre, very slow. It's not very fluid, actually. If you see him throwing a jab, it's not a quick snapping jab like Kelvin Gastelum's. It's a very labor jab where he has to put his whole body into it, and he leaves his chin wide open for him to get countered. And as far as boxing goes, Kelvin is a lot more fluid, keeps his chin tucked in, his shoulders are huge, like right here, and his jab is extremely lightning fast. He's very basic in his striking, but it's so effective. Great, excellent 1-2, and he has a great leading uppercut where he will make fighters think he's going for the 1-2, but then he'll come in with the uppercut, and then he'll soften them up. He likes to go to the body, but kicking game, you have to go with the kicking game for Kelvin, because his kicks are a lot more quicker, and they get to the legs a lot more fast. They're a lot more faster with his kicks. He probably won't try to kick his head because the height advantage is going to be so huge. And on top of that, Chris Weidman also has a reach advantage, but a reach advantage doesn't matter if you don't know how to use it. His boxing is just isn't good enough for him to use his reach advantage against Kelvin. And that's where I think Kelvin will have a huge advantage, is if he keeps pressuring him, and with his cardio, he could end up finishing Chris Weidman in the later rounds. See, the fact that this is a main event and it's a 5-round fight is where I think Kelvin's chances increase big time. Because here's what we've been seeing from Chris Weidman lately, and I'm not so sure if it's going to happen again, but there's a strong chance it will, is that he looks strong in the first round and a half, goes for a takedown, he's out wrestling the guy, he's out grappling, and sometimes he'll do some damage, but the middleweight division is so strong that they've learned how to counteract Chris Weidman's wrestling and just get back up to their feet. And yeah, it's great. You can keep working on that style, Chris Weidman, where he tries to ground and pound, kind of like a Frankie Edgar style, where Frankie Edgar will take you down and maul you. But the thing is with Chris Weidman is he seems to get tired after the first round and a half. He'll like shoot for lazy singles, and they do not look as strong as they did in the first round. That happened against Luke Rockhold, Yoel Romero, Mousasi, where he was reaching for takedowns, and they were capitalizing on that by outstriking him and continuing to push the pace against Chris Weidman. Chris hasn't seemed so strong in the later rounds. And these are just 3-round fights. This is a 5-round fight. If Kelvin Gastelum weathers the storm of the first 2 rounds and avoids getting pounded out or submitted, there's a strong chance in the 3rd, 4th, or 5th he could end up TKOing Chris Weidman, or at least edging him out to where he can win in the judge's decision. But we could see another Neil Magny where it ends up being Kelvin Gastelum being a little too late, where he just wins the last 2 rounds, and then Chris Weidman won the first 3. But if Chris Weidman can fix that cardio, and he can still impose his will and his size and strength and the wrestling department and pound Kelvin out, he should be able to win. There's no reason for Chris Weidman to be having cardio issues unless the weight cut is just too much for him. Chris Weidman is a huge 185-pounder. But what Kelvin brings to the table is that he has great enough grappling, and that speed of his and cardio is able to negate the size difference as far as technique goes. Because Kelvin Gastelum, his boxing is only going to continue to get better. And he knows what he has to work on. He knows he has to defend against Chris Weidman. So my prediction is, I think Kelvin Gastelum, 4th round TKO. Or if you look at it the way Chris could win, either by a 3rd round submission or a 2nd round TKO by ground and pound. But I think what more likely is going to happen is Kelvin Gastelum can weather the storm because he is such a hard guy to put away. So I'll give it Kelvin Gastelum 4th round TKO. And that's where I'm going to go into this fight. I could be completely wrong because Chris Weidman can all of a sudden just fix that cardio issue he has and just completely just continue to take Kelvin down at will. Will it happen? I'm not so sure. It's hard to see Chris Weidman getting Frankie Edgar type cardio and just mauling Kelvin Gastelum. But that's how I see this fight going. Give me your thoughts on who you guys think is going to win between Chris Weidman and Kelvin Gastelum. Bye.